thought I was going to be so bored being sober. And like, I do not have enough time in my day. I don't have enough time in my year. Like, there's too many books I want to read. There's too many countries that I want to go to. Too many meals I want to have.
Welcome, everyone, to the Embrace the Serpent Skin Shedding Conversations podcast. I am Elena Rose Davis, and I am a holistic healing artist and Master Sattva yoga teacher. And I am here today with the beautiful, the talented Cold Chance of Cold Chance Yoga.
That is correct. That is me. I'm so happy to be here with you, dear.
So Cole and I met in Bali. I think it must have been 2017 maybe, or 2018. Time is a weird and funny thing, but some time ago, we met in Bali at a cafe, at our favorite cafe in Ubud, and we bonded over being sober. And we stayed in touch after our initial meeting and decided to collaborate on a retreat in Colorado that we actually just did about a month ago. Mm-hmm. And that retreat we decided to call Journey to Freedom. And I don't know where that came from.
Sing it.
Oh, the journey to freedom.
I missed that.
You missed it. I knew I would get you. She was telling me that she was going to be annoyed and over it by the end of the weekend, but I think it's something.
I actually miss it now.
Oh, I like singing things. So the journey to freedom, I don't know how we came up with that, but I think we talked about at the retreat about what freedom really means to us. And we both bonded as two people who I would consider rebels, which is a little bit how we kind of ended up maybe getting into the drugs at a young age and getting into some troubles and some dark times in our lives. We both had this idea and this concept in our mind about freedom having to do with not having responsibility, and that freedom, we associated that time when we were partying all the time and doing lots of drugs as a really free time, that we were being free spirits or whatever, right? So I wanted to kind of expand on that today in today's talk and talk about how we've actually, both of us have found the most freedom since we became sober. And how do we have fun as sober people? And how do we still have that feeling of freedom in our lives? How do we still cultivate that in our lives without using what a lot of people use to free their minds, to free themselves of inhibitions? I mean, that's what a lot of people are using drugs and alcohol for. Like, I've had a long week. I gotta chill now and throw a couple back. And you and I both don't do that. So I wanted to have this conversation because I find myself feeling like there's a lot of people who want to get sober that I talk to, but the idea of them not having that thing is kind of inhibiting them.
Indeed. It's really interesting the way that the ideas of freedom shift so much. Because I definitely always thought that freedom was going to be, something that I heard the other day. Tara Brach was talking about the if only mind. If only, if only, if only. So she was talking about it in terms of, if only I lost weight, I would be happier. If only I lost weight, I would be loved. Or if only I had this house, or if only I had this job, or I had this man, whatever it is. And I kind of did the same thing in terms of, I guess I combined my happiness with this idea of freedom, of unrestriction. Like, if only I wasn't in my parents' house, if only they would leave me alone, if only I could get out of school, if only I could get out of this place or this country. And it was always away from something, pushing, this resisting. And it's so interesting that, you know, that it turns out that everything that I was doing so drastically to find freedom was like slowly like tightening the noose around me. And, you know, I say often that, you know, alcohol and drugs were, you know, my medicine, and at the same time my poison. And it's just interesting. The unravel has been really interesting.
There's a quote that says, "What nourishes me destroys me." I'm not sure who says that, but Angelina Jolie had it tattooed. And it's always stuck with me, because the very thing that destruction is a path to nourishment. And especially when you can come out of destructive behaviors and see the lessons and see the reason. I love that you always talk about that we're meaning-making machines as human beings. And that's, I think, for me, make a major coping mechanism. And our retreat and our conversations and our relating really helped me realize that that's a way that I cope, is I cope through trying to figure out and understand the deeper meaning of everything that's happening, you know? And so the destructive behaviors that we both engaged in when we were younger has helped us get to the point that we are now in our lives. So I want to ask you if you are open to sharing a little bit of your story and kind of your history and what led you to here, and what fun. Did you really feel like you were having fun? Are there memories that you still look back on during those times that you miss, or that you look back on and fondly at this point? Or have you really come to a place where you see it as just destructive at this point?
That's an interesting question. Do you want me to recap my story or answer that question, or
just starting with a little bit of your story and then maybe flowing into that?
So I was raised in a little Oklahoma town. I was just a little prairie girl, and I had a good childhood. And around 13, I drank for my first time. And it's like, I didn't realize, it's like I was slapped across the face by like, oh, this is life. And I know that that's not normal for most people, like my physiology or whatever it was, it like catapulted me into like a technicolor version of life where I didn't even know that I was living in black and white. Or it's like, I didn't know I was like in a 2D world. And then all of a sudden I was like released into the 3D. And that's what it felt like. And I remember I even got sick that night. I think we were drinking like peppermint schnapps or something horrible. And I even got sick that night. And it was like the best night of my life. Like it was a peak experience. And, you know, really many really real severe alcoholics and addicts, they remember the first time this clearly. Like this is not like a normal thing to remember so vividly, but I do remember laying in my friend's pool and looking up at the stars. It's like I felt so connected to everything. And I told myself, I'm going to do this forever. Like I was sold. I was all in. I cashed in all my chips. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is it. And I mean, that's a problem. I mean, 13, I see 13-year-olds now and I'm like, no way. No way. I felt really old. I felt I was really mature.
Yeah, you know, you're an old soul, of course.
Yeah. So I started, yeah, it's like the obsession was there. So one way I can describe it is like, I felt the most like me than I ever had in my life. I felt like I had unleashed, this is the time when middle school was starting. So I was starting to have like being self-conscious for the first time. I'd never really dealt with that. So I was starting to see a hierarchy with people, like the cool kids, the not cool kids. Like that's not really ever something that I had thought about that much up to that point. And so some anxiety came along with that. And then when I drank, it was just like, whoa, like I'm me. I completely felt embodied and connected and like just, intoxicating. It was just, it felt really powerful. And yeah, I was hooked. And not long after, I started sneaking out of the house, and I had a cool older boyfriend. And the first time that we had sex in the back of this tiny little Acura, I got pregnant. And just like, oh my God, I just kind of blacked out, I think is kind of what happened. I don't really clearly remember how we found out and everything like that. But I found out eventually, my parents find out, the school found out. So just imagine an anxious, and I wasn't that anxious, but someone 14. And I was in Oklahoma. So whenever we went to go have the abortion, there was like, I don't even know, 50 protesters standing outside, letting me know how horrible I was and that I was going to hell and, all of this. And it was just like undigestible, which is, a definition of trauma. I couldn't digest it. What I did digest is that, not that I made a bad choice and something very uncommon happened, but I digested that I was bad. And then on top, I was already going to be an alcoholic. I definitely don't blame my trajectory was set. I don't blame that, but that the need for the substance then intertwined with this undigestible experience and shame. And then it was just a recipe for destruction. So I started the story that I was bad. I'm bad. I've been like branded the scarlet letter, all that jazz. My parents moved me schools. They moved me schools several times, because then I would go to a new school and you can automatically, you can like automatically know who like your people are. Mm-hmm. So I would like automatically go to the people who were partying. We like skip school, and then I'd be in trouble. I mean, like the first weekend of one new school, I was like arrested somehow at some party, and like I just continued to do this. So one thing that I like to talk about is the wound that seeks the arrow, which is this concept in Buddhism that the wound, being my story that I was bad, was continuing to seek arrows to validate it. Like I needed to be validated. I needed to be told that my story that I'm creating about myself is right. Whether it is I'm powerful or I'm, beautiful, people seeking for affirmations or seeking more power. My story was that I was bad. So I was seeking ways to prove it to myself and to everyone else. So I continued to get into all kinds of trouble, and I would just be like,
what do you expect?
What do you expect? And the addiction grew really strong in me, on a physical level as well. Very young. I was then into lots of drugs, lots of really everything. And I was sick really early. It wasn't really gradual. I'm really surprised that I made it so long. It was quite severe, probably when I was 16, 17. And then I started going to rehabs. I went to first one, I think I was 16 or 17. I went to about 6 or 7. Many, these are interdispersed with me. So I was always wanted to travel. So I would go and travel into Colorado mountain retreats, Colorado mountain trees, Colorado ski resorts. And then I would live somewhere else in the summer. So I was hiding, being able to hide in these resort towns. Everybody's partying. I was working in restaurants. I was cocktail waitressing, and then I was bartending. So I could be drinking when I was working. I was drinking when I wasn't working. There's tourists everywhere. So nobody looks at you weird whenever you're drinking mimosas or Bloody Marys in the morning. And very quickly, I realized that I drank in the morning often with people, but I was pretty young when I realized that if I drank in the morning by myself, I wouldn't shake. So I started shaking at a young age. So then I remember thinking I was depressed or there's something wrong. I also thought I was drinking too much coffee.
It's the coffee, not the booze.
I quit drinking coffee because I was shaking. No shit. I only recently started drinking coffee again about 6 months ago. Because I was shaking and I thought it was the coffee. I mean, surely I didn't really think that, but I quit. I wanted to take action. So I quit drinking coffee. And it was alcohol, but I had to keep a certain amount of alcohol in my body. So I wasn't a binge drinker. Well, I guess I was like an all the time binge drinker almost. There's different styles of alcoholics, and I was a maintenance. I partied, but I was also maintenance. So I constantly had substance in my body because otherwise I would withdraw. I'd had grand mal seizures from withdrawal. So I always had I had to have a baseline of blood alcohol. And let's see, speeding it up. So I'm kind of traveling here and there, ended up in rehabs here and there. I don't ever want to go to the rehab. I'll get sent there somehow because I've run out of money or I got a DUI and someone talks me into it. I do want to feel better, and they do help me feel better for a little bit, but about halfway through the rehab, I'm just like plotting my escape and like how I'm going to do it right, because I was obsessed with the idea of being a normal drinker, being a normal partier, because I didn't know what I would possibly do without it. I didn't know what people did who didn't drink. I had this identity of myself as a party girl.
Right.
And I needed that. I was incredibly attached to that, of like being the bad girl and the rebel, and really attached to that. I needed that. So I continued. Every time I would get out, I would like drink on the plane home or just right away. I really didn't want to get sober. The first time I took a yoga class was at a treatment center. I think I was 25 or something, and I was in California in Santa Cruz, which is beautiful. And I was at this place, and there was this big greenhouse. The yoga studio was a big greenhouse. So it was all windows. There was redwoods everywhere. There were like birds chirping. They're like cartoon birds. Like I swear, they were cartoons. Like, and
Snow White.
Snow White was there. Oh my gosh, everything was beautiful. But then I was laying on my yoga mat, reeking of alcohol. I was sweating booze out of my pores. Like I can still smell that smell.
Wow.
It's like I would get goosebumps all over my body, but I was hot. I was sweating. It's like it was escaping my body.
Wow.
Like it was trying to escape. And recently I smelt that, actually. That same it's a sticky, sweet smell. I smelt it on a guy sitting behind me on the plane. And I was like, yeah, it's a very distinct smell. But anyway, I was like shaking on my mat. Everything around me was impeccably beautiful, which just made this even more deplorable. And this is the first time that I'd done yoga. And I remember the yoga teacher was like an angel. Her voice, she was Snow White. Yeah. And she had said that she had been a heroin addict for 20 years. And I remember being like looking at her, like trying to see a little bit of myself in her. And I was just like, no, bullshit. I didn't believe her.
Wow.
Really looked like she had it all together. And I just watched her. It's like I just watched her for a month. And a few things that happened that month. Well, whenever she told me what namaste meant, which I'd heard it, but I didn't know, is that one thing that she said was that stuck with me was that my higher self sees your higher self. And up until this moment, remember, my story is that I'm bad. Like I don't have this higher self. And it was like quite a concept for me to be like, like what would a better version of me decide, or what would this other part of me decide? So that was really powerful for me. It didn't keep me sober. I remember when I left there, I remember saying, I so thoroughly enjoyed it, the yoga. And I remember telling myself, like, if I ever get the sobriety thing figured out, which I'm not going to, like, even that thought came in my head. It's like my two voices, my little devil and angel. I'm really in, but I'm not. If I do, I want to explore this yoga thing. But I started drinking right away. But throughout the next 5 years, I think I was out for another 4 or 5 years. I would go to yoga class every now and again when I was able. So like I said, I was a maintenance alcoholic. I might be like really, really far gone, or I might be just averagely, functionally drunk. And then I would go to yoga class. And so a way that you could really ask me how I was doing is, you could say, like, how are you doing with the drugs and alcohol? Or you could say, when's the last time you've been to a yoga class? And it became this space of safety for me. It really, it's like these four corners of the mat were a place where I didn't have any distraction of alcohol, of party. I used to have, it was a constant party. It was a constant people around me, things to distract me from what was going on with me. But in this space, that wasn't there. All of the masks, the identity that I had put on myself were not applicable in the yoga studio on my mat, because it was just me. And I was not used to being with just me and checking in. And I was really lucky to have some amazing teachers. And I was just talking about it today, how it's so funny that, I used to think that, like, they're talking right to me. Like, everything they're saying was just like, do, 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 do. Yes. But what's so interesting is, like, at that time, I didn't know that these are just human things. These are human things that relate to everyone. Right. I was just kind of like, how did you know? Because what addiction does is it isolates us. We think it's connecting us, but it isolates us. I didn't think anyone understood. I didn't tell anyone. Anyway, fast forward, things, people always ask, like, what was your bottom? I'm kind of like, I had lots of bottoms. I was very low bottom, and I hit lots of them. It was hard for me. You mentioned something about denial. Is that I was in a really deep denial, and no one else was. I mean, it came to a point where no one was in denial about me having a really big problem except me. For example, like, Al-Anon is for the family of alcoholics. Like, I think when I got sober, my mom had been in Al-Anon for like 12 years or something. And she used to always say, you're not hiding it like you think you are. Like, I thought that I was, like, so suave. I still tell the story like I am, or like I was, because I still think that I was, but I don't think that's actually true. Functionality is subjective, I suppose. But yeah, in the end, it was just, I was tired. It was just like a free for all, not in a good way. It was just like nothing mattered. There wasn't a lot of, there was no drive. The family, I had so much shame for how I had treated my family, how many relationships I'd left, the way I treated my friends, the way I would just, like, up and leave job. I mean, I just didn't really care about anything besides feeding this hunger inside of me, which was getting more and more and more and more insatiable. I just felt like I was like this mind of slavery that was, like, dragging around this, like, addicted body. Like, I was so not, like, it wasn't my leg, it wasn't my foot, it was just like this thing that was attached to this thing. And in the end, I was using heroin. Was something that I said that I would never do, of course, but in the end, it didn't matter. And luckily, that didn't last too long, a few months, and I had an overdose of an injection of heroin and cocaine. And yeah, it was really scary. My speech left. I just crumbled to the floor. It was, yeah, lucky. I came to a few hours later. Everyone had left. And I remember thinking that this thing that somebody had told me a while back. Cause I remember asking somebody like, how did you get sober? Like really, I was just like confounded. Like, how did you do it? And she told me that she came to realize one day that she could be high or she could be happy. And that once, they used to go together and they go farther and farther away. And it just like, it finally dawned on me. Like it took me overdosing from shooting drugs into my blood to realize that, oh, this isn't going to work. You're not happy. You're going to die. And I didn't want to die. I didn't have a death wish. I'm not naturally depressed. I'm not naturally, what pulled me towards drugs and alcohol was this sense of freedom and this sense of connection and this sense of being part of and being ignited and this ecstasy that came along with it. And like, I was not there. I was not there. So it's like, God, I'm so stubborn. And I remember
you are.
I've had so many therapists. Oh my gosh. I used to like think it was like a game to drive these therapists crazy. But I remember this therapist telling me like, if you ever just get stubborn in the right direction, she like said it with like foaming at her mouth, like,
wow.
And it's kind of like I just deflated this balloon of like, I'm just going to bull through, do what I want. And it's like that day I just like popped that balloon and was just like, done. And I got lucky. I found someone that would take me, a sober living place that would take me in that I'd actually been kicked out of a few months earlier for hiding wine bottles around the sober house. And they had no reason to take me back, but they did. And, rehabs wouldn't take me. I tried to get in some state funded rehabs. They wouldn't take me because I'd been too many times. My parents' family wouldn't talk to me. My mother had completely cut me off. She had to. And, yeah, it's like I needed that. Prior, people were just sending me around to new places, get more help, sending me money, things like this. So I personally really needed that.
Right.
That disconnection. I needed to have a sense of empowerment. I mean, I was disempowered, but I needed to make that choice for myself.
Right. Of course, because you're a rebel.
That's right.
Rebels you can't tell us. We have to decide. Which is why we're so fucking self-destructive.
Oh my gosh, I know. Crazy. Like it was absolutely crazy. Like I don't know how I could have even lied to myself that there wasn't, it's just absurd. I remember, you met my father. Now I'll share this because you met my father. Because for some reason I always blame my mom. That's where I put all my angst towards my mom. It's all her fault. But I did it to my dad for some reason. And I remember one day he came to pick me up somewhere. Something had happened and I don't know. Picked me up at my house. There was like people passed out all over the house. We had like a stack of drug paraphernalia everywhere, a giant stack of empty wine bottles and vodka bottles. And the house was a fucking wreck. And I had bruises all over my body just because I had like edema and pancreatitis and I had all these health issues. And I just, and I'm having fun. And my dad just goes, "Look at you, Nikki." And that's the only thing he said. And I was like,
a man of few words, but impactful.
Even now, it like makes me tear up. I'm just like, oh my God. But just like, I just didn't want to look at myself. I didn't want to look at myself. And in the end, I did. And being on my yoga mat is what helped me do that. Like, that's the only space that I knew through those last 5 years. I'd cultivated a little bit of a relationship with myself only on my yoga mat. The rest of it was all smoke and mirrors. So whenever I wind up being done, got into the sober house, I found this like 30 days for free or whatever at this center in Austin. And I got into child's pose, which is this prostration, this physical body prostration of reverence and of surrender. I just lost my shit. Like I just was like ugly crying in the back of this packed class. And I felt so scared and a little bit of hope. Mainly, I was terrified. Like, I barely made it back. Because I had had many stints where I wouldn't make it back to my mat for 6 months or something like this. But like knowing how close I was to not making it back. And then also knowing that I had to stay. And then that's kind of where the rest of it began. And, you know, I got my yoga teacher training there in that studio, and I just kept coming back to my mat, coming back to my mat, coming back to my mat. And much more than just the physical, but with the self-inquiry and with sitting with myself and just all of the different little pieces and the things that we do to create a relationship with ourselves. And I mean, I had no freaking idea of what was possible on the other side. I thought sobriety was going to be horrible. Horrible. Like losers. Like, what was I going to do with my day? Like,
okay, so there's so much that I want to touch on from what you just talked about. I have totally come to the same conclusion about my addictions, that it wasn't ever really about the substance itself. It was the intimacy that I felt that I was gaining with others by being on drugs together.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely what it was, because my drugs of choice were ecstasy, so the intimacy drug, and cocaine, which is the drug that you do to sit around and talk and have conversations until the coke wears off, and then you're just like, where's the next bag? And then you're
like, who are you? People, I don't like you.
Oh God, the sunlight's coming out and we're all vampires and what's happening? I've definitely come to that conclusion for myself, that was what it was. And I also made the same stance to become a pothead. I made a decision when I was 16, because when I was 15 is when I started using drugs. And it actually started off with, I tried weed, but I didn't get addicted to it right away. And I tried alcohol. And I've shared with you before that the first time that I ever got drunk, when I was 15, I got raped. And so immediately alcohol was like, I was really scared of it. And I did drink, but I didn't really party with it. I was afraid to go out and drink at a social event. So it was like something that I didn't do that much. But when I was 16, I had been partying and doing all these hard drugs, and I could see that was leading me down a very dark path. And so I was smoking weed with my friend. I'm holding this because I was smoking out of a hookah. I had a hookah. That was I had like a whole collection of bongs and hookahs and pipes. And I said, I'm going to become a pothead because it's better than the other stuff I'm doing. I'm still going to do that stuff, but I'm going to do this the most. I'm going to do this every day because I loved how it calmed me down. And like you, I took on an identity that had to do with the drug. I'm the cool stoner chick. So chill. I don't care about anything. I'm so relaxed, cool. I'm like, go with the flow. And that is so not me. I am not.
I like how you're like.
I'm intense. And what I realized was that I numbed and dumbed down my intensity and my true nature, which is a powerful, strong, vibrant woman, from such a young age, by smoking weed from the moment that I woke up all day long, before and after every single activity, and when I went in order to go to sleep, smoking until I fell asleep. And a lot of people ask me, well, was it bad for you? And it didn't make me a couch potato, if that's what you mean. Like I succeeded and I was highly functional with it. But I was addicted to it. I was smoking it constantly. And when I wasn't high and I wasn't smoking, I was thinking about smoking and when is the next time I'm going to get high. And to me, that is an addiction.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter. And I think it's what's really good for us to have these two different conversations, or have this conversation together with these two different experiences, is I did not have as destructive and as, I never went to rehab. I've never shot up anything. I was addicted to marijuana the most out of anything, but it's still an addiction. And it still led me to this place, exactly what you're talking about, crying on a fucking yoga mat going, I don't know myself. I'm not comfortable enough to be with myself without getting high and removing the true essence that I am. I have to alter it. I have to alter my state. I have to alter my natural state in order to feel comfortable, to feel connected, to feel confident. And I came to the same realization, even though I didn't go to rehab, and even though I didn't shoot up, and even though I wasn't an alcoholic, I came to the same realization. And yoga, like you, was a big part of that story for me, a big part of that journey for me. The journey. But so I came to the same conclusion that I wasn't happy, and that I was tired of using substances to alter my reality. And I wanted to know who I really was. I wanted to have an intimate relationship with myself and with others, without having to be high or drunk or on something in order to feel connected to them. Because to me, that's not authentic. So going back to that interesting question, right? Do you miss, is there anything about that time, or by using drugs, since we were using it, what we've both come to is that really it was about connection and intimacy. Do you feel like now, what is it like now as a sober person? How do you connect with others without any substances? And is there anything from the past when you were using substances that you feel like made it easier, or that you miss, or that you're still figuring out, you're still in the process of bringing into your life now as a sober person, and interacting a lot of times with people that aren't sober like you are?
Yeah. Well, if there's, okay, that was a big question.
Yeah.
What was the first part of it?
Well, we've unlocked that a lot of our addiction had to do with connection.
Yeah.
And so being a sober person, a young sober person, as we both are, out there in the world, socializing with others, seeking connection with others, seeking to have a good time with others.
Yeah.
Is there anything from those days that you look back on and you're able to use from then that you're using toward now? Or have you been able to come full circle, or is there anything you're still unpacking from that time? And what have you learned about connecting with people in this moment and in this space of sobriety?
Yeah, I think that, in the beginning, it was really challenging. Yeah. Of course, I didn't know how. I remember listening to people in the yoga studio, and I'd hear two girls be like, "You want to go get tea?" And I'd be like I'd never been on a tea date before. It's just all these little things. I was it was really hard for me in the beginning. I had to completely kind of learn again. But what was so beautiful being in that space and that in spaces of yoga was that there was a lot of permission given. I guess it might be prompted, or it might be workshopped, something like this. So these having permission in certain containers was really helpful, which is why I like to do that so much now. I actually just taught a workshop earlier today. We were doing different connection exercises. But what I found is that, and prior to me getting sober, I remember really being disgusted the next day about the conversations and the connections that I'd had. Like the night before, maybe I'd be up doing cocaine all night long, and the next day I'd be like, I don't even like that person. I actually can't stand that person. and we just talked forever, like life story, and just talking to hear myself talk, like I just can't quit. And I'm just realizing, just thinking like this fake fun. This is fake fun. And I remember thinking that for a little bit before I got sober, like, this is fake. Like, yeah, it's fun. I had fun. I had a lot of fun, and a lot of it wasn't, but I did have a lot of fun. I did. And I still do sometimes have this picture of myself, like with my head thrown back, like, like, I'm just having so much fun. And that was the image of myself, when really I wish if I could just really see what it was. But today I'm very fortunate to have some beautiful people in my life. And I feel truly connected. There's not like a question or a hint of like, is this real or are you just drunk? Like, I don't have to ask that. Or it's not like you hook up with somebody and you're like, yeah, I was just a drunk hookup. It's like these questioning of motives, questioning of authenticity, of connection isn't there. It's like, I'm going to show up, and the people that I surround myself with, they show up as well. And I don't have to navigate around that. And there's a feeling of immense safety in that. And that's really what we're looking for, like a connection and a safety in connection. Some things that I definitely still deal with stuff. I don't think that it's like an unhealed and then healed. It's definitely a process. I am learning to listen to my body more. Yesterday, actually, so I'm in Guatemala right now, and I'm like doing all the things. I'm like going to salsa classes, to Spanish classes, to the textile market, and then dinner with these people, and then lunch with these people, and working. And the last few days I've been like super jazzy and like, I just want to do everything. I like, yes, which I'm a yes girl. I say yes to lots of things. And then I came home last night. I was going to go to the salsa club last night, and I came home last night to change, and I took my pants off, and that's like as far as I went. And I'm like, I don't want to go out. I really don't feel like it. And I spent the next like 30 minutes or an hour being like, but you should, but I don't really want to, but you should go, but I don't really want to, but you should, like this back and forth. And then I realized last night that the way that I've been feeling the last few days, I've just been I've just been really excited. Lots of good things are happening. And, which is a feeling that I had whenever I was drinking and stuff a lot. This is the feeling that I would drink for. I was always really effervescent and manic and like, ooh, let's do this. And then we're going to do this. And that's what I felt like the last few days. It's kind of interesting, completely natural. But then what would happen? So if I would have came home last night and had plans to go to the salsa club and I didn't feel like going, I would just take a couple shots or I'd do a line, because I don't want that feeling to end. I don't ever want the feeling to end. So by listening to my body last night, once I tapped into that last night, I was like, in a different life, I would have made myself go out. I would have had fun, but I'm not listening to my body. So I stayed in last night, and I was like,
fun, right? And what is fun? Is fun always going out dancing? And like, that's the thing I want to kind of get into here. And that is, you perfectly flowed into that. It's like, when you're sober, sometimes a fun night for you is a solo dance party at your house and a delicious home-cooked meal and curling up in bed and reading a book. And I would describe that as fun if that's what feels relevant for me in that moment. Other times, fun is going out. I went out last night and it was not planned. I went to the art walk, and there was this beautiful gallery with all this glow in the dark, trippy. I mean, if I'd been tripping on acid, it would have been cool. But guess what? It also was really cool without any acid and really fun and unexpected. And so I think that your idea of fun when you're sober, it just shifts, and it really has more to do with what's really, really true and present for you in the moment, and not these expectations and ideas. I used to, when I was using, to rev myself up, if I knew I was like, I had a rave coming up, I would like go to the gym and I would like be on the treadmill, my headphones on, blasting techno music, and I would fantasize and fantasize and fantasize about my upcoming rave experience and how amazing it was going to be. And I would imagine I would come up with my outfits that I was going to wear, and I would plan them, and I would like go into this whole like ridiculous fantasy about how amazing this night was going to be. And was the night ever, did it ever live up to that ridiculous fantasy that I created? Absolutely not. Because especially with ecstasy, the come down is such a crash. It's such a massive crash. And you call, chasing the dragon, right? So I was always chasing the dragon and taking more pills and trying to, and I also was hospitalized a couple of times when in my early 20s because of taking too many pills and mixing them with other drugs. And it was because I never wanted to come down. And I just wanted to stay in that fantasy because it wasn't real. And I think that that's what shifts as you get sober, is that you still have fun, you still have connections. And in fact, I think what is available to you through sobriety is it's real. It's the most real and authentic fun and the most real and authentic relationships and connections that you've ever had, when you especially were a person that used to only gain that through being under the influence of substances.
Yeah, definitely. And like I mentioned before, there's just this, it's like the safety that's in it, of like a knowing that this is real. Like we're really connecting, like we're really, we're really doing this, not having to question, like, is it because of this? Is it because of this? It's actually available. And yeah, for the aspect of fun, we're not meant to live in a state of ecstasy all the time. Like we're just not. That has, we ebb and we flow, and to fight the natural rhythms of that is not good, to put it lightly. But yeah, back to the fun, it switches, it changes, it shifts. I love reading. I had a good time getting into my bed with my book last night. And I woke up early this morning and went for a run and went to the Guatemalan market. And, these different things that I feel like I get to like be a part of. Like I got to walk through this market today and like see so much life and so much vibrancy happening everywhere, where I used to walk through life, if I wasn't in this state of, in the ecstasy state of the addiction, or of the substance, then I was completely with the horse blinders on. Like, where do I get more? How do I not smell like it? How do I let them make sure they don't know? Is there just always something? And that actually rips us away and isolates us from reality, from what's going on. So the amount of connection that is available in sobriety is, you're actually you're actually within, part of, and it takes more than just not using drugs and alcohol, but it's a full journey.
I want to speak to, because it's coming up in my awareness as we speak about this, the other addiction that a lot of us have, which is love and relationships and sex. Because we're talking about how we're not meant to be in a constant state of ecstasy. And I think it's important when we speak about this that we also, bring up that we can bring this awareness into the way that we relate in our intimate relationships and also in our friendships. It's not always going to be ecstatic. It's not always going to feel pleasurable. It's an interesting thing, because I definitely see in my addiction that I would include relationships and sex as a part of that journey. And it's led me to spending long chunks of time in celibacy to really unpack that, because it's I don't know if I want to say it's more difficult, but it is its own brand of challenge to understand and to examine and to heal the addiction to relationship and sex as opposed to the addiction to a substance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to bring that up and see what your thoughts are on that when we're talking about having fun and ecstasy and joy and do it naturally and authentically. How do we do that?
I know it's really easy. It's really easy to say it. It's one of those things that's really easy to say. And it brings up it feels like a whole, there's so much similarity, but it brings up like a whole other aspect of things once you get into intimate relationships, especially intimate relationships.
Yeah.
Like I'm incredibly put together and sane, I think, when I'm sober. I mean, not when I'm sober, when I'm single and when I'm sober. But then once enter boy and hormones, it's like it all disintegrates. There's like, oh my God, it gets all wild. And it's been a big challenge for me. So this is something that is, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, what am I still working on? And this is something that has been a big challenge for me. I've only had one serious relationship since sobriety. And I just assumed that once I got sober, then like, I was never going to have any issues again, like with anything. So much to my surprise, when my last relationship turned out to be like crazy town, I knew it just couldn't be me. I'm sober. But, you know, it's interesting to me. Sometimes I just think it's amazing that two people ever get together and make it work out, because sometimes it seems so far away, but it's a delicate dance and an exploration. And I can't imagine how I even attempted it. I don't even can count the relationships I had when I was using, because they were like so far out there. So I've really only had one serious relationship, and the rest of it I'm just kind of navigating, and we'll see. It's easy to practice when you're by yourself, and I think it's really important, but it's still a whole nother ball game when somebody else enters, because I'm a wonderful and amazing and supportive hypothetical girlfriend. Tell your friends. But then, when something enters, all of a sudden I notice that I'm like, oh my God, the insecurity comes in, and then I think that I need to perform, or like imagining what the other person, who they think I am, and then like wanting to play that role. And, all kinds of things come up. We have so many patterns in our world, that in our lives, that were formed even when we were little kids, that they're just going to replay themselves. And it's this constant unpacking of the patterns. And that's something that you can do outside of a relationship, but they often still come up inside. But it's all a practice.
I've also been in one relationship since becoming sober as well. And I realized that the party girl, wild drug user inside me, she's still kind of running the show as far as what we find sexy in a man. So I'm like, ooh, irresponsible. Check.
Still a baby.
Still uses drugs. Check.
Yeah.
Like a little grungy in a sexy way. Check. Like there's an attraction to that. And I really struggled with this relationship, because I'm like, I'm sober and you're not, and that's okay. Like we can maneuver around this. And then I found myself in situations where he was like, so are you going to mind if I'm taking ecstasy at this party that I've invited you to? And I was like, I don't know. And then he's like, oh no, I should never have asked, because now you're looking at me weird. And he felt judged just by the fact that I was sober and that I was uncomfortable with his choice to use.
Yeah.
And it's like, I realized, and it's been an actually challenging thing for me to accept and to even voice it in this platform, but it's skin shedding. I'm shedding the skin, and I am revealing that, like, I feel that I need to be with someone that is not using drugs anymore. Yeah. And the wild child inside of me that has always been attracted to that kind of the rebel man, the like bad boy is like, what? Well, then you're only going to be with these boring yoga dudes. Like, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I'm also still trying to, allow it to flow and be gentle with my process. And obviously I still had something really valuable to learn from that relation with that man. And he was attracted to a sober person, even though he's not, and maybe gained something from his relation with me. And so there's always a purpose, I think, in when you get into a relationship, there's something that you can learn from it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I learned was, if I'm going to be sober, then I probably need to be with someone else who's sober. And you and I have talked about this, but we want this very specific type of sober. We're like, we don't really want you to be like a ex-heroin addict who's like in AA sober. We just want you to be like, I don't really like need this anymore sober. It's like picking and choosing the kind of sober dude that we want.
That makes me wonder, like, I wonder if people think that about me. And this is interesting. This is interesting because, well, in my last relationship, my ex, I didn't realize that he did have, it came out later that he did have lots of reservations due to my past. And they weren't really voiced until kind of the end, but that it was challenging for him, for me to have my past of being this wild thing and not trusting me due to it, and thinking, all of these things. And I had never really thought about it that way. Or it had never come up that I would think that somebody else would think that about me. Another example is one of my friends in Bali was asking me, we were talking about relationships and about how, like, I just don't have any intimate relationships. And he was like, what do you think that it is that, what do you think that it is? If there is some block that when people look at you, what do you think that it is? And I had said, I can't remember exactly what I said. I think I was saying like physical attributes or something. And he was like, what? And what he said, he goes, I would have assumed that you would have said, one, that you travel all the time and you're like a boss woman, that like there's some sort of intimidation there, that there's the travel thing or the addiction thing. And I was like, really? Like, it didn't even dawn on me. One, I think the travel thing's freaking amazing. And like, I think that's something good about me. And I think that one of the best things about me is that I'm sober and that I that I did all of that and I got through it. And like, to me, I guess it's just in my perspective, knowing the amount of work and the amount of digging and exploring that I've had to do, I'm like, that is a highlight. So then to hear that might be something that people are like, I don't know about that. That's kind of interesting.
Seriously, because I felt like in this last relationship that my sobriety was actually one of the things that he did not like about me. And it came back to him thinking on some level that I was not fun. That I didn't have fun with him in the way that he has fun, which he told me straight up toward the end of the relationship. My idea of fun is like going out and dancing and taking drugs. And I was like, I love to go out dancing. I just don't want to take drugs. I don't really want to be with you and all of your friends while you're all on drugs and I'm not. That doesn't sound particularly fun to me either. So obviously there is an incompatibility there. Yeah. And I think what we want is exactly what you said. Someone that goes, her sobriety is one of the coolest things about her, because it is not easy to become sober. It is not easy to acknowledge that you need to become sober. It takes a lot of deep digging, and it's a commitment. It's, it's a choice, and it's not one that is made lightly. And I think that it usually means that there was something that happened in the past that was challenging and that you got through it, everything that you're saying. And it adds to your character. It adds to your richness and to your wisdom when you've been through challenging things like that and you've come out of it and said, I'm me and I'm going to be totally myself because I've seen the darkness in myself and I'm going toward the light, and I've danced with my shadow, and that's how I emanate this much light, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I
Well,
think that it's just, yeah, I think it's something to be proud of. And
yeah.
it is absolutely. And I'm a really big advocate of shedding the skin and of showing up and sharing about the things that we think that no one's going to clap for. You know, that's the places that we connect. And really it all goes back to the connection thing. And whenever we isolate ourselves in these things that we think, you know, keep us from connection or keep us from other people, you know, being able to really show up into that. And it's not going to be accepted by everyone. You know, some people aren't going to be ready to have you in your fullness, or they're not ready to look at their own stuff. Who knows? I mean, there's lots of different ways, but the ones that do, it's beautiful. And that's what, you know, that's what we're looking for.
What do you think? Do you find sometimes that your sobriety is triggering to other people?
Not that I know of, but I'm not in scenarios very often where I'm around people that are using or drinking. Lucky to spend a lot of my time in Bali, especially in Ubud, where that's not around. But I remember being triggered by sober people. Totally. I remember I didn't trust them. And I felt like I couldn't connect with them, which is the opposite now. Now when if somebody's like just drinking, I feel okay. But if somebody, once the words start slurring or anything like that, I just feel like I can't connect. But that's the same thing I thought whenever I was on the other side of it. Like, I'm tripping and you're sober. Ugh. You know? So, I mean, I get it. I get it from that side, but it's just not where I'm at. I'm not into it. I'm not interested. I don't really want to be with somebody who drinks and smokes, or that does it as a need. I don't know if I could date somebody who drank. I don't want to taste it. If it was, I don't know. I haven't crossed that bridge yet. It would have to be really very respectable. I don't know.
Well, before we wrap up our conversation for the day, I'd love to just ask if there's any final thoughts that you want to add to it, or any questions that you want to pose. You're really good at asking questions and, yeah, pulling out a lot of good stuff I've watched you in your teaching out of your students through posing questions. And so I also want to give you that opportunity if there's anything that you feel like you want to bring into the conversation.
Well, I'm just thinking about a few things that I talked about in the workshop I just did this afternoon. You know, one of the questions, well, I do want to mention that, you know, we don't know everyone who's watching this, and some people may have a substance addiction and some people will not. That what we're describing beyond the physical substance, it's the underlying feeling. It's the underlying feeling of wanting to be connected, or to get out of discomfort, or to get out of insecurity. We're always grasping onto something or pushing something away. So I think a really important question is, what do you do when you're in discomfort?
Right.
You know, and that's a question that we talked about today. And I think that it's really potent. And, you know, normally I ask the questions to students, and then today we had an odd number. So I was in a pair, and I realized, like, I ask this question all the time and it was kind of hard for me to answer. I'm like, what do I do now when I'm in discomfort? I would like to say I meditate, but, you know, I don't. I won't first. Maybe eventually I'll get there, but normally when I'm in discomfort, often I leave, depending on the situation. I notice when I start to get uncomfortable, I'll look at plane tickets. Or I'll, you know, I have a tendency to think it's this place that isn't right, or it's this person that isn't right. It's something outside of me. So I have a tendency not to look in the first, but I'm catching that pattern. And then now, like, whoa. what is happening here, filling in. And I think that it's so important that we just look at the patterns, because not until we bring those unconscious patterns into consciousness and into awareness can we do anything. We're just conditioned monkeys. What do you do when you're in discomfort now?
Well, we've talked about this before, that, and you really helped me unpack this at the retreat. I did the opposite. I go inside and I'm like, what did I do to call this in? I have manifested this situation. I, needed to learn something from this. So what is it that I needed to learn? And so I blame myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm uncomfortable, that's what I tend to do. I tend to go inside and it's a good thing to do that to some degree. I think it's good to, you said I try to reframe things by doing that, instead of getting into, I don't want to ever fall into victimhood. So I, want to immediately go into that place of self-correction. But either way, I'm still running from it.
Yeah.
Either way, I'm still running away from what is, and assigning meaning and making it a thing that has to mean something, instead of just being uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable, being okay with being sad, being okay with being angry, being okay with being not okay. And I don't give myself space for that all the time.
Yeah.
Because I want to be, the strong and powerful being that I am, but it's also okay to not always maintain that 24/7. It's not really possible.
Right. Yeah, we just have to allow. It's hard. It's challenging. And especially, like I mentioned earlier, sobriety is not just quitting the drink or the drug, but that substance was the medicine and the salve for our discomfort.
Yeah.
That was the solution.
Yes.
To discomfort.
Oh yeah. I mean, when
you take away the solution, what do you do?
Yeah.
What's the new solution? And I think that now we get the opportunity to, what I would like to do, we connect in, but then also connect out. We need each other so much for co-regulation, and being able to call someone, to be able to create these safe bonds in order to have that space to process the emotions. And I think that's what's so important, and a challenging thing in our time now is that we're so self-sustained now. We used to have to need each other more, get this interconnectedness to need each other. And now, you can stay at home, you can have food delivered, you got Netflix. I mean, everything can just come to you, but we need each other. We need to process our emotions. We need all of this. It's a survival mechanism. Turtles have shells, snakes have venom. We're not the strongest species or the fastest or anything, but the reason our survival mechanism is that we can bond and cooperate. So whenever we're living in isolation, this breeds the anxiety and the addiction and all of this stuff. So we need to reach out, to be able to reach out and utilize the things that our animal body wants. Like, our bodies are made for connection.
Yes. And fun and joy. Our bodies are joy bliss machines. So it's really important, especially, as people who are sober, is to find community, or people that are, even if you're not completely sober, but you're just interested in this idea of coming together in a space where there's not substance used in order to connect and to have fun. That's what the communities, like the things that you and I host, workshops and retreats and events that we put on, that are really, we're not using substances, and we're getting high naturally with the practices that we do, and with moving our body and dance and breathing and connection. It's so important that, I think that's why we're both so passionate about this work, because we need it. We do the things that we need. We offer what we need into the world. And it's absolutely necessary in order to, like you said, to survive. I mean, so the beetle is one of the creatures that has been on this planet the longest and has survived for millions of years. And the reason that it has survived is because of community, because they work together. Where there's one beetle, as I'm sure you've noticed, he's got all his friends with him.
Yeah.
And they're always working together. So that's the reason that they've survived all this time. And yeah, the ego wants to isolate itself, and substance is just a tool to isolate oneself. I loved to smoke alone. You know, toward the last couple of years of I was an addict of weed for 15 years. And toward the end of my addiction, the last couple of years of it, I was smoking by myself. Mm-hmm. I wasn't hanging out. When I was a teenager, I would hang out with my friends to get high. But when I became older stoner, I just wanted to be alone and just get blazed and just become numb by myself. It was really sad. I just look back on it and it's really sad. I was not alive like I am now. Right now I feel more alive than I've ever felt.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, I do too. I completely agree with that. I mean, I couldn't have, if people would have asked me before I got sober, like, what do you want to do? Like, if you could imagine your perfect life, you know, like I would have not even had the language to describe what I feel and what I'm doing now, and what the feeling of freedom now feels like to me. Mm-hmm. Like this feeling of just connectedness and safety, and it's dependent on a framework. Like I have a framework for freedom, and that includes my practice, that includes sobriety, that includes, you know, being bonded with people, women and men that I love and that support me, and I support them. And then from that place, like there's just an endless expansion, an endless space for expansion. And that is what freedom is to me now. That's what it feels like to me now.
Freedom and fun.
Freedom and fun. You can have them both.
You can have it all.
You can have it all.
I love that. I love this conversation. I love how we've spoken from the seed of wisdom that we've gained in our 30 plus years of life and through all of our life experiences. And we've also talked about the shit like we still haven't got it figured out. And we're like kind of just like, yeah, I don't really know yet. I'm still working that one out. And that's what these skin shedding conversations for me are about. It's not about talking to experts and it just being like, I know everything and the answers to the universe. It's like just talking about the real shit and being like, I mean, I wanted to have this conversation with you because we've had this conversation. Everything we've talked about today has come from conversations that you and I have had and that we've been having over these last couple of years that we've known each other and will continue to have because they're so not done. No. And, you know, we are learning from one another and we are gaining perspective by relating with one another. And then we're coming together and hosting retreats together to continue to spread that and to share that with our community. So we're doing it. I'm so proud of us. I would love for you and I to plug our retreat that we have coming next year now. And I also would love for you to talk about how people can find you and all of your resources and all of your magical journeys and retreats and all the things that you're doing in the world.
Yeah. So, well, we are going to be going back to Colorado, September 9th through the 13th.
Yes.
Joyful Journey, Colorado. Some beautiful hot springs, and we're close to the Great Sand Dunes, which is this magical reserve. And we're just going to dive into, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And it's not like necessarily recovery based, but just connection based and fun based. Yes. And we had a wonderful time this last year. So we want to do it again. And it'll be something special. I look forward to that. And then I am Cold Chance of Cold Chance Yoga. And you can look up Cold Chance Yoga on all the things. On YouTube, I have tons of classes on YouTube. My website's Cold Chance Yoga, Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz. And I've always got something going on. I thought I was going to be so bored being sober. And like, I do not have enough time in my day. I don't have enough time in my year. Like, there's too many books I want to read. There's too many countries that I want to go to. Too many meals I want to have.
You are anything but boring, Chance.
Huh?
You are anything but boring.
I love you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here on this podcast, on the Embrace the Serpent Skin Shedding Conversations podcast. I so appreciate your time and your wisdom and your beauty and your fun personality. I really love you, and I can't wait to be reunited for our retreat next year and to have many more skin shedding conversations in between.
Yes.
Muchas gracias.